Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to do a slightly off-kilter video, slightly different to what I normally do, about fnOS or fnO Private Cloud NAS. This is a closed source Chinese NAS operating system currently in beta, and I'm willing to bet before I even reached the end of that previous sentence, I lost about 90% of you. Notwithstanding, this is a beta NAS operating system, notwithstanding it's a Chinese closed source NAS operating system, it is one right now where, although it does have English language support on it right now, it's not fully comprehensive. Now, why am I talking about this? There's a few reasons. One, a lot of you have contacted me about this, as this has started appearing on a lot of social media platforms, including TikTok and YouTube, by the way, and alongside that, the growing forum and usability of this platform has started making it appear on a lot more kind of people's radars. Several of you have reached out and asked me to do a bit of a dig into this. This is going to be my first look at this. I've not even set up the NAS that I've used this software on yet, so we're going to go through this process. It's probably going to go through this in the next few hours, and obviously I'll chop out all the bits in the middle, so I'll kind of give you the highlights there. But the other reason I'm talking about this software today is because a lot of Chinese NAS solutions arriving right now, which have an operating system on them, not just the ones that are going to support Unraid or TrueNAS, have started including their own NAS operating system, which is basically a splinter of this. And that's what today's video is about. We're going to look at this, kind of weigh it up, and obviously, needless to say, this is a beta, this is a relatively unknown NAS operating system. I wouldn't trust this without a significant number of backups and a significant multi-layered security precaution in place. This video serves as pretty much me just showing you where this software is at and whether you should care. The other thing I'm going to highlight is there is a mobile application as well, which may look very familiar to some Chinese NAS owners right now, as again, as I mentioned, splinters of this software have already been utilized elsewhere, and this particular GUI may be very familiar to some of you. But let's go and set up our storage, shall we? I'm quite close to the keyboard, by the way, so I apologise if you hear that clacking. And moreover, I'm actually testing several different NAS devices here in the background for the channel. And the problem is, a lot of them are in the middle of processes, so there's a little bit of background noise there. So I apologise for that humming. But let's crack on, shall we? So let's give our system a name. Let's go. Test. Let's give our system an account. Let's give ourselves a password. How much of this language we're seeing here on screen in the lower cases is to do with the translation, I'm not sure. But for now, I'm not going to go too hard in terms of grammar too much at the very least. There we go. We've got a new version update, even though I downloaded the latest version to a USB installer versus with Etcher. So let's go ahead and update that storage and go to the latest version now. So I'm going to fast forward to the installation of that update. Well, that wasn't too quick. Let's go ahead and enter our login details. Again, any issues I encounter, I'm going to include them in this. Again, this is a beta, so we're going to try and give this as fair a swing as possible. Let's go ahead and create our storage. By the way, I'm using Ugreen DXP 480T, a 4-bay flash solution. So let's go ahead. We're going to get 3 of those drives because I want to see where expandability lies. Already, we're seeing language barriers. So let's go ahead first and go into those settings menus. Let's have ourselves some fun. Now, almost certainly it's going to be somewhere there. I'm going to cheat ever so slightly. Well, I was hoping I could use Google Translate, but sadly that isn't the case. So if we go ahead and try and navigate our way into a language setting. So fast forward about 30-40 minutes, and I've got good news and bad news. Now let's start with the bad, and that is that it doesn't look like currently fnNAS operating system has English built in there. I had to use Google Translate and Google Lens a great deal while navigating my way around this operating system, but overall when I went into the knowledge base I was able to find with translation that at the moment they are not working currently on the English version. Their plan is to get this to version 1.0 and then add English language or multilingual support later on. However, there's still discussions taking place, and again I found a couple of contradictory statements ultimately whether English will be applied to this. So for those of you that are already put off by the very idea of a Chinese closed source network attached operating system in beta, I'm sure this sentence here is only going to make it worse for you. For Chinese users, it's going to remain free of charge. For domestic class users, I imagine enthusiasts, but not SMB, not enterprise or anything like that. But overall, the other bit of bad news while I was going through it was that you can't use Google Translate. When you try to use Google Translate in every single form and variation that I use, I could not get this to translate. However, the good news is, and I don't think I've ever used this sentence before, Microsoft Edge to the rescue, because Microsoft Edge's Translate was able to filter through. So we are going to be conducting the rest of this here on Microsoft Edge, something, again, I never thought I'd say. But overall, when we go through the NAS operating system, again, we're going to have to overlook sometimes when the language or the grammar looks a little bit out there because we are using translation. But overall, let's take a little look at what this has got going for it. As you can see, we've been running it for a while. It's desperately trying to translate there on the fly. Again, we can create a remote access account if we choose to. What does that mean? Well, it means if you do want to remotely access the device, you can use, DLNA services, stuff like that, or they do have their own Connect service in place. Now, again, this is in beta, and it's a Chinese NAS operating system that most of you have never heard of. Of course, I'm not going to recommend using that service, but I just wanted to highlight that it's still quite good that a beta software that's been made by a small community is still able to have these relay services in place. And when we look at the application center, at least in the app center, which is a containerized app center, by the way, there is support of those third-party services, and because it's containerized, there are some pretty decent options that you can use instead of using those. So if you do choose to go down this road and test this out, definitely don't do this with live, hot or mission critical data. Have your backups, have your remote access security in place. Nonetheless, it's still nice that you've got those options there. And doubling down on that subject of security, it will probably come as no surprise to anyone that you're not able to take advantage of two-factor authentication. There is no option here in place if you want to go ahead and, add second-tier verification on there. I'm sure the mobile app may be able to have something there, but that's a real shame that option isn't there. And when we try to create brand new users, there is no option for that other than standard password use and role use there. And you can create individual groups as well, stuff we're kind of used to, but it's still nice to see featured here. Now, in terms of storage creation, I have gone ahead and created a RAID 5 environment there. I was able to utilize 3 of the drives. I've left a 4th one so we can test the expandability there, but there isn't support of taking advantage of, say, ZFS. So if we go ahead and destroy this pool later on, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show you it really with this one drive. Again, there's only support of BTRFS, so if I go for a basic mode drive there, going to the next option, you've only really got support of ext4 and BTRFS. Again, we're not going to criticize this for a misalignment of text because we are using translation here. That always creates errors like that. So there isn't ZFS, there isn't your RAID Z, but you've got your standard multi-disk parity there. So if we go ahead with this RAID 5, look at the sub options. One of these, I believe, allows us to add a drive, which we can do. Now, if we choose to, we could expand that very easily, add a password, boom, it's done. BTRFS, ext4, they've both got that option. Same goes for SSD caching. If we want to use an SSD, we've got those options for read or write caching all built in there. And again, aside and nose to pause, fairly standard stuff. But again, I just wanted to pause a moment. And again, I'm trying not to, endorse this too much because this is still a relatively unknown, frankly unsecure beta NAS software. But when I do make comparisons from this to something like Casa or ZimaOS, this is way more feature rich. And I will say, particularly when we're looking at things like TrueNAS, when you've got HexOS, that paid premium overlay for that, and again, that is ZFS, that is a completely different beast. I just wanted to put this into a little bit of context, that we are still talking about a small community project right now that is running on donations. They've actually done a not too bad a job here from what we're seeing, and I do think we have to keep that in context. Now, I've created the storage area. We can manage network ports. The DXB480T from Ugreen here only has the one network port, so unfortunately I can't see what it would be like in terms of failover and bonding and ports and stuff like that. But there is a wireless card built into this, so if we choose to, it does look like we're able to take advantage of the Wi-Fi card that's built into this NAS that allows us to connect to Wi-Fi, something a lot of kind of, I'm not going to say open source, but I'm going to say community and DIY NAS software. It doesn't actually support Wi-Fi cards, so it's not bad. They've got that. I'm not a fan of utilizing their own remote access services, but at the very least they have allowed for others, and they have allowed for some double verification methodology there, but I would hardly call it ironclad. SSH access, I should say, is available here, and again you can set that up to individual users with their own access protocols. Then in terms of security, it's actually unsurprisingly not as tight as many of us would like. We can reassign port numbers, adapt our firewall protocols, add SSL certificates there, and again I'm sure Let's Encrypt is going to be one of those available options, but it's hardly what I would call bulletproof. File sharing protocols, we've got SMB enabled by default, is SMB3 enabled here. Multi-channel is available, which is good to see. It's actually a decent amount of configurability on that Samba connection, and of course if you want to back up a time machine and more, these options are there. Alongside WebDAV, alongside FTP, NFS and DLNA for that multimedia streaming, so decent enough stuff here. Pretty much everything I would like to see is on offer. Now, we've got a native file explorer. I've already connected a drive, already transferred over a bunch of data there from Plex Media. So why don't we take a brief moment to see what native playback without using dedicated apps is going to be like. So if we try to play, I'm not going to go for a TV show because YouTube is funny like that. But if we go ahead and play ourselves one of the multimedia files, let's go ahead with that 30 megabit HEVC. As you can see, even though this NAS has integrated graphics, we're not able to take advantage of the integrated graphics engine. So if we go for an H.264, it's playing natively. We've got no right click there. We've got enhancements. I don't know what they are, but that's really it. There's not much to play with, and we will go into the native multimedia app shortly. Why don't we have a little look at photography? So let's go ahead and look into some of the photos on this device. Let's go for that one there. We'll go for a random picture of food, and as we can see there with those terrible plates, look at that chip. There's not much more to play with there. We've got zooming in, we've got rotation, and that's really it. We can download the file, find out information there. It is crawling the metadata. I will give it that at the very most. But that's really it. What about we talk about music? Let's go into the music files there. Let's go into video game music. We'll just play back a file. And again, we're not able to play multimedia like that natively, unfortunately. Maybe it's because it's WMA. No, it's all that. So that's really the file explorer. And when it comes to native file options there, we've got the option to kind of download it locally. We can cut, paste it, that kind of stuff, create an external share link, expiration date, passwords, even a limitation of number of access times. That's actually not too shabby. So overall, the file explorer there, not too bad. We've even got configuration options there to bolt on remote access storage quite easily, and a lot of configuration options there that I know are being badly presented by the translation, but there's still, at the very least, those kind of global options are all built in, and you can even break down into the app files as well, and that remote access mounting we've just discussed. Now, returning to the application center there, we've installed a bunch of the native apps there. Well, we can go ahead and install some of those if we choose. But before we go into them, it's worth highlighting, again, these are container Dockerized applications here. These are apps that have clearly been ripped from existing repositories, and it's only really these ones at the top that are the de facto ones. This isn't unusual. We see it quite a lot. But when it comes to apps, I'm not going to give this brand credit for things like Jellyfish and MB and some of these other tools, because these are third parties supported by their own communities there. So let's go with the ones that they've already got. The multimedia application here, so let's get that translated as well, and this allows us to create and manage our own multimedia input there. So let's go ahead and tap in some of those details. Let's get this logged in. I'm at a weird angle to my keyboard, so apologies if my tapping is incorrect. Link to the admin account, go ahead. As you can see, fairly standard stuff. We're not able to translate that yet, so we're just going to go for preferred language. Let's see if it allows us to do another one. English it is. Right, cool. Giving it access. Name of the server, let's call it test serve. Let's go ahead and now presumably create ourselves a library. We'll give it movies. Go ahead, and this is all fairly standard stuff. Presumably we have to give this app permissions, which is where we would have to go in, presumably into here. Let's fast forward. Okay, so I've added some multimedia there, and it does look like metadata scraping is available here. We've got that there. Let's go into the movie section and make our way back into what we want to see here. So let's see how well that metadata scraping has taken place. Again, this is clearly a lift of things like Plex, MB, and Jellyfin. We've got all that information there. I'm not going to play these files simply because I know what it's like with YouTube trying to get a lot of that stuff done, but at the very least, it is good to be able to see that we're able to kind of test what's here. Let's see what the options are. We've got audio kind of transference between all of those. We've got the ability to sort of flick stuff in between. It's all fairly standard stuff. No native right-click options there, but that's really a lot. Again, we've got conversion support there, but that's really it. So again, the film application does exactly what it needs to. I don't know if that does allow for us to be able to HDMI out, perhaps. So if there is the option to kind of spread that out, so you control an HDMI output, you've got the option to scan. You've got the kind of metadata options and sources. You've got the option there natively to take advantage of hardware transcoding, something I'm pleased to see. And it's weird that I should have to give that praise that software is using your hardware resources when there are software out there that actually bar you from doing so. I'm looking at Plex Pass, how dare you. But apart from that, that's really it for that multimedia output. What about the photo album? Why don't we go ahead and create ourselves a new album for photos? Let's see if it'll allow us to use photo data there. Let's crawl those in, get those sorted inside. Then it will no doubt start crawling the area I've just added, so we'll come back to that later on as it finishes crawling the photo data I've added. Let's go back in. What else did we have? We have a virtual machine appliance there. That's not too shabby. Fair play to them for including a virtual machine appliance tool. Again, I would have liked to see iSCSI, something for some reason we don't see that much. Let's put that in there, but at the very least we've got that option. Presumably these are the different kinds of Windows VM that we set all of our different parameters there. Presumably we select the ISO going into the loaded tray, but it seems pretty straightforward. I'm not going to deep dive into that too much there, but at the very least it is still an option for users who want to take advantage of VMs, and there's at least early doors the options on the table. I will say I'm kind of surprised that snapshots have made it in that early doors. I know they are borderline native to BTRFS, but at the very least it's still good that this is built in straight out of the gate as something to take advantage of there. Again, I'm looking at you, ZimaOS and Casa OS, for not having a lot of these features already. Again, cloud synchronization, when you don't have access to a lot of the more westernized cloud appliances, probably less so, and whether you would still trust it to do that with your Google Drive, well, that's really up to you. And the Office preview, this again is going to be that file management there, but again, without using a native westernized English Office appliance, I wouldn't recommend it anyway, because would you really rely on it there? But if we go back into that photo appliance, it's started doing all of our scanning there. We've got our photos there. Let's go ahead and select a photo. Let's go for one a little bit high res actually. If we go into the recognition, so already we're getting the geolocational data being picked up there, so we can have a little look at all the different stuff. We're not able to take advantage of a map appliance there. I know support of Google Maps in China is limited, but they do have their own, I believe it's Baidu, map services there. Let's go ahead and take a little look. Let's go to the other file folder view there. So if we go in and have a little look at the albums on a file folder level. So we've got all those options there. Let's select ourselves a photo. That's a higher res photo than the one we had before. Let's see what we have in terms of metadata scraping. So again, not terrible. Again, let's come out of it there. We've got our options for downloading, sharing, applying to a folder, no doubt. Folder management. What about we go in and look at that AI recognition there? So we've got our facial recognition there built in. Again, they can be, we've got all our different options in image recognition. So object recognition is there and facial recognition is there, but I don't know how far it goes. So again, we've got that storage for uploading. The configurations there, I'm not going to say it's anything groundbreaking, but at least it's very good that we've got those options. Interestingly, when it comes to the AI models, again, I know this isn't going to be for everyone, they've actually got straight out the gate the option to choose different AI models yourself. Now again, presumably that lowers resource use internally. By the resource use I mean the team, being able to download different models in order to take advantage of AI services a little bit more upscaled or downscaled to your own requirements and needs. Obviously, how much of this is being utilized with just local access, like these models that I'm downloading here? whether they are completely and unadulterated severed from the internet and therefore only running locally if you download a model, which isn't unheard of, or these are going to be using remote access services. I'm not too sure, but I did wanted to highlight there just that level of choice with the the AI recognition model of choice. It's actually a kind of a unique and a little bit of a breath of fresh air, but without knowing what extent these would have access, I'm kind of reluctant to say how good a thing that is overall. Next, let's talk about backup services. Backup services on this, let's face it, if you're buying a NAS, you're going to be backing them up, files one way or the other, from local to desktop client. Let's have a little look. So again, let's see how things play out. Let's go for storage space here. Let's just go for that standard folder. I would never recommend doing that, by the way. And then from there, we can see that you can create that task, again, to another NAS using this OS, presumably simplifying the process. Again, limited cloud support, unsurprisingly, and you've got those other local access protocols or even a remote access via WebDAV supported there. The other hand, you've got doing it in the other direction. So let's go ahead, another NAS, we're able to choose a file folder there, and we're able to see that if we choose to, selecting another area within the same NAS system, we've got all of the rules for our backup that we can set in place, presumably exclusions, limitations, that kind of stuff, and how and when you want this backup scheduled. So fairly standard stuff. Again, if you are someone that's coming off the back of Synology DSM, QTS, TrueNAS, Unraid, that sort of thing, this isn't going to be really that impressive. But once you look at other options in the market, this is actually surprisingly well presented for what it is. Again, it's a beta. It is a Chinese closed source NAS operating system, but I've got to at least give them their dues. They've got the bells and whistles. They've got the services in place. And given the number of different NAS operating systems that seem to be building from this same OS in terms of splintering from it, I'm going to say this isn't terrible. I'm not going to say it's secure. Hell no, because it's still too early in development to have gone through any kind of rigorous secure evaluation and hit and pen testing or anything like that. But this is actually a lot better than I was expecting. The fundamentals are there. Everything you're going to need, at least in terms of, a NAS operating system that you want to dick around with, are here. It's not finished. I wouldn't call it secure, and certainly I wouldn't recommend it to anyone in the West outside of China currently. But as an indication of what they're trying to do, it's actually not too bad. All the options are where I want to see them, and if, for example, a more established Chinese hardware vendor rolled out this software with westernized language and a little bit more security in place, I wouldn't be hesitant to at least test this out. I still don't think it's, a patch on your Unraid or TrueNAS or more, but at the same time, it's not horrific. And I think that's the big tell here, that NAS operating systems, at least in the DIY sphere, are getting better and choices are out there. Again, if you're a business, I wouldn't recommend this in a million years, but at the same time, I like what I'm seeing here and what this is indicative of, and I've got to give the team behind this their dues. Now, again, there is the mobile application. I don't cover it in this video. If you do want me to see me do that, I can, but I don't think you probably will. But apart from that, I hope you've enjoyed this light little dive into other NAS operating systems. And if you are interested in learning more, I'm going to link towards fnNAS below for you to check out. This hasn't been endorsed by them. It's not been paid by them. This is just something that a number of you in the comments and via email have asked me to look into. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.